Last night was President Trump's first address to a joint session of Congress. And I want to read to you what Van Jones, who is, of course, a Trump critic, a liberal, and this is in the Washington Post, I want to read to you what he had to say about it. He said that Trump's tribute to Navy SEAL Ryan Owens, who died in a raid in Yemen, was, quote, one of the most extraordinary moments you have ever seen in American politics, period. And that it was the moment that Trump became president of the United States. He said during Trump's remarks, cameras trained on Owens' widow, Karen Owens, with tears streaming down her face and facing her, Trump said her husband's legacy was etched into eternity. And then they go on, they have his full commentary, and he said, for people who have been hoping that maybe he would remain a divisive cartoon, which he often finds a way to do, they should begin to become a little bit worried tonight, because that thing you just saw him do, if he finds a way to do that over and over again, he's going to be there for 8 years. Now, let me tell you something. When he said a divisive cartoon, the people who were divisive cartoons last night were the Democrats who sat there, most of them in white, these women in white. They were the divisive cartoon. They showed that they would refuse to join with Donald Trump in pursuing the common good for the American people. They're all about their self-interest, all about their self-aggrandizement, all about their petty politics, their petty political careers. And they showed this by refusing to applaud for this Navy SEAL's widow, sitting there on their hands. We showed that to you. But then it got even worse. At one point, they booed Donald Trump when he talked about helping people who have been the victims of crimes committed by immigrants, violent crimes committed by illegal immigrants, foreign citizens here illegally. And he wants to set up a program to help them. He said, we must support the victims of crime. I've ordered the Department of Homeland Security to create an office to serve American victims. He said the office is called VOICE, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. We're providing a voice to those people who have been ignored by our media and silenced by special interests. And the Democrats booed him. I tweeted that out live. I was live tweeting the speech last night. And I said, wow, that truly is amazing. It really shows where they're coming from. They are the divisive cartoons. They continue to go further down. And I thought it was interesting because he introduced the father of one of the people who was killed, a black man, Jamil Shaw, father of Jamil Shaw II, who was a 17-year-old high school student when he was killed by Pedro Espinoza, an illegal immigrant. And he was interviewed on Fox News Channel, Fox and Friends, and he said, I was like, man, you know, what do they want? They don't want nothing but division and bickering. They don't want to solve any problems. They don't want to help kids or husbands or family members that have been murdered by illegals. I mean, just the way they did that was so disrespectful. But it's bigger than them, so I just keep on moving. I just ignore them like they ignore me. See, we're all understanding now, black and white. We understand that these Democrats are about nothing but themselves. And they will put together a demographic that they think can keep these demagogues elected. And I think they were the big losers last night. And I want to just throw this in. Just within the last week, we've seen a guy who was an ISIS car bomber. Now, we talk about vetting these immigrants who come in. They say, oh, this is awful. You're keeping people out of here simply because they're Muslims. It's like, these are 7 countries that Barack Obama went to war with. He sent bombs. He sent troops there. So maybe you should have said something about that if you don't think the people are dangerous. But nevertheless, take a look at this particular situation. We've got a guy who was apprehended in 2001, 2002. He was held in Gitmo for 2 years, from 2002 to 2004. And when he was released, his name was Ronald Fiddler. He was a UK citizen who was in Pakistan there to fight. They thought he was part of the Taliban. And after they released him, he said he was tortured in Gitmo, and so the British government gave him £1 million, about $1.5 million, as compensation. He wasn't amused. He went back to fight, to continue to do this fighting, and he blew himself up in a car bomb in Iraq. So all these people who say they're going to do extreme vettings, they're against any vetting. We just don't even have to do vetting. Think about the fact they had this guy at Gitmo for 2 years and they still didn't know what he was about. They still let him out. They still gave him compensation, $1.5 million, and then he continued to do that. Now, I want to change gears, and I want to go back. We've talked a lot about the Oscars, and of course, that was the last big public event that we had before this joint session of Congress. I want to go back and take a look at something. There's a channel called Honest Trailers. They do a great job of parodying the movies. They did a program a week before the Oscars, and they went through all the different nominees, and they did a short bit on all of them. And I want to show you what they did about the film that actually did win Best Picture, Moonlight, because it shows that the important part about that was a political agenda. You have to understand, the Oscars are a political award that is put out there. People who are pushing their political, their social, and their sexual agenda. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So here's a clip of that.
Follow along on the poetic unfolding of a life, beautifully directed by Barry Jenkins, as this young, black, gay man struggles to escape from poverty and drug addiction, told across 3 decades, based on a play, based on the life story of its author. So yeah, I'd say it's nominated for an Oscar.
It's got all of the checkpoints. And yes, it was the one that won. They knew that was going to be the one that won because it went through every checkpoint of their agenda. They have an agenda that they want to push on us. And I want to take a look at how that's starting to look. The agenda that they're pushing on our kids, to sexualize our kids at an earlier and earlier age, to confuse them about their gender. We've had the American Pediatric Society talking about how there are only 2 genders. And this is really child abuse when you're doing this to kids, to try to confuse them. Let's take a look at this article on InfoWars today. Disney Channel cartoon features the network's first same-sex kiss. A crowd of cartoon characters appear to deliver same-sex kisses to gay and lesbian partners. This is from Season 2 episode of Star versus the Forces of Evil, entitled Just Friends. And when you look at this picture, and you look at these stills that are there in the article, I mean, here's a couple that are isolated, and everybody around them is doing it, okay? This is Brave New World that is being sold to our kids by Disney. And of course, they've sold magic and all this kind of stuff for a long time, but now they're focusing on the sexual agenda. And they say throughout this first on-screen screen same-sex personal display of affection, Disney has periodically included non-heterosexual relationships in its TV shows, like the lesbian couple in Good Luck Charlie and a gay couple in Gravity Falls. Viewers have also speculated about the possibly gay characters included in the films Zootopia, Finding Dory, and Frozen. Disney has also reportedly been entertaining the prospect of an LGBT Disney princess, with a campaign last year urging the cartoon giant to turn the princess Elsa from the film Frozen into a lesbian princess. Well, you don't have to wait any longer. The Telegraph in the UK pointed out today that Disney is going to have its first exclusively gay moment in Beauty and the Beast. This is going to be the live-action version of it. They say Disney's moving firmly into a new era as it introduces its first exclusively gay moment. And I want to read you what the director says about this. This was an interview that the director gave with a magazine called Attitude. And the director, Bill Condon, said, this character, LaFaux, maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, I don't pay any attention to Disney's Beauty and the Beast. But anyway, it says, is somebody who on one day wants to be Gaston and another day he wants to kiss Gaston. And Josh makes something really subtle and really delicious out of it. And that's what has its payoff at the end, which I don't want to give away, but it's a nice, exclusively gay moment in a Disney movie. See, they're pushing this on your kids. When I look at that picture, whether it was homosexual or heterosexual kids over in the background, what they're doing is they're putting peer pressure on. They're normalizing behavior for very young children that is not age appropriate. And we know where this is all headed. The next place it's headed is, of course, the transgender bathrooms. That's what this is all about. And moving towards pedophilia. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But take a look at the penalty that Target has paid for pushing this agenda in their stores. Their stocks are down $15 billion since promoting their transgender agenda. And they were pushing it very hard in their stores. They were at the forefront of trying to push this with their product lines, then pushing it with their bathrooms. Now their value is down 30%, while Walmart has gained 3% in the same period. This is a story on Infowars.com from Breitbart. But where is this all headed? Of course, it's all headed towards normalizing pedophilia. And we have an article from the Free Thought talking about what's happening in the UK. 2 things. Number one, how they are pulling back from naming streets after politicians or heroes because they're afraid, it's happened so much, they're afraid that after they name these streets, then they're going to find out that the person has been exposed as a child molester. They say, and this is a guideline that has been sent out to city councils in the UK. They said, don't do this. They say it avoids a possible occurrence of future information coming to light that may then taint that specific road name based on an individual and give rise to costly street renaming procedures. They say this may seem odd, but remember that pedophilia has long been a history of the British elite. Matter of fact, you go back several decades to Edward Heath, former Prime Minister of the UK. He's been accused by the police chief as being a pedophile, and they had made his home in Salisbury a memorial museum back in 2015 to mark the 50th anniversary of him becoming the Conservative Party leader. Then the exhibition, they say, is now a glaring embarrassment as dozens of his former victims have come forward exposing his disgusting sexual crimes. British citizens refuse to patronize this shrine to a monster, so it sits empty. Now understand, this is a Conservative Party leader, and these are people that the establishment has covered up. We saw that happen with Jimmy Savile. He was investigated by Scotland Yard several times, and it was shut down by the people who were higher up. They did a documentary on him after he died at the BBC, exposing what he was, and the people who were higher up at the BBC shut that down. Do we give a pass to people because they agree with us politically, because they're conservative, we're conservative, because they support Trump and we support Trump? See, this is the issue that I had with what was going on with Milo. We don't want to move that line closer to pedophilia. That's where these people are going. We don't want to blur that line. We don't want to erase that line because we agree with somebody who, politically. And that's precisely what was happening with us. We do not want to give people a pass because of their politics when they engage in this kind of issues. And what we're talking about here, folks, is consenting adults. I had a lot of people get very angry with me. You say you're a libertarian. We're going to unfollow you on Twitter. I frankly don't care. I'm going to stand before God one day, and I'm not going to be asked how many Twitter followers I have. And you will too. And you're not going to be asked that question either. And we do not throw our children under the bus for any political agenda, any sexualized agenda that is coming from the media, especially. Look at what else is happening in the UK. As this is becoming an epidemic, there they say, also from Free Thought Project, the UK police announced that there's so many pedophiles in the country that it's exploding at such a rapid rate that they will stop arresting them. Because police cannot cope with a huge influx of reports on child abuse, they now say pedophiles whose only crime is viewing child pornography should undergo rehabilitation instead of going to prison. Remember when all this stuff happened with Milo, he was only talking about it. He never committed it, and he was a victim. He's a victim of people like this. Do we want to perpetuate that by talking about it, by normalizing it? Because of politics? No. No, we don't. So now what they're saying is that in 3 years, the number of child abuse reports have skyrocketed by 80%. And the chief constable who's head of Operation Hydrant, this is something that was set up to investigate multiple allegations of historic sexual abuse across the UK. The BBC reports he knew his view would cause nervousness and draw headlines because he said the number of reports of abuse are such huge proportions that they cannot look at these particular crimes, the things that are going to be moving people towards actually acting on what they have created as urges. So they're not going to pay any attention to people because they say there are literally tens of thousands of men who are seeking to exploit children online with a view to meeting them. So they're going to focus on that rather than the 500,000 individuals who are engaged in child pornography. That is the sickness that faces the West. And where does it come from? It all starts with Diz-gay, pushing all this agenda. And this is Hollywood throughout. They have a political agenda. They have a sexual agenda. They're all tied together. And we have to understand that they're pushing that agenda. Then we have the other issue. Remember that Zbigniew Brzezinski talked about a technocratic elite. Well, the technology is the key part of this that we need to be concerned about. We've seen yet another nightmare robot from Boston Dynamics. And they called it a nightmare-inducing robot. The people who created it called it a nightmare. This thing is a mixture of wheels and arms. They said it only has 10 actuated joints, and so it is significantly less complex than the walking robots. The wheels, they say, are efficient on flat surfaces, while the legs can go almost anywhere by combining wheels and legs. This robot that they called Handle is the best of both worlds. And so the founder of this organization, which was bought by Google, says that this is a nightmare-inducing robot. Even Google communication staff sought to distance the company from the hardware, they report, This was an email that was leaked to Bloomberg. They said such technology could be terrifying. Yes, you should be very afraid of this. You should organize to oppose this. And yet what we see is the people who are involved in technology, like the people at Wired Magazine, talk about how this is really an evolutionary marvel. They look at the very sophisticated technology and they rejoice in that. They say the world laughed when we looked at the DARPA robotics challenge of just 2015, but look at how quickly we see this new life form evolving. This is another form of sickness that we have to get over. We have to understand that this is merely a tool, but there is such a thing as good and evil. This will be your overlord. This will be the weapon of evil men. Stay with us when we come back. We're going to talk to Ted Malloch. We're going to have clips of Alex Jones's interview with him earlier today on the radio show. He is the man that we need to go to the European Union. He is America's Nigel Farage. Stay with us. We'll be right back.